So we all love E85 as a fuel. It makes lots of power, especially with turbo motors. We call it turbo crack. High compression, naturally aspirated, it does really good. But there are certain conditions where E85 can wreck your engine. So normally, I'm a big proponent of E85. E85 burns clean, it burns cool, and it doesn't like to detonate, burns slow. There are certain conditions though where it can totally destroy your engine. Let me show you this great example right here. This is out of my daughter's STI. So when she was a kid going to high school, she mostly drove about 1.4 miles to high school. The car would sit there all day and she would drive 1.4 miles home. Nowadays, kids don't drive too much. They have FaceTime and all this other stuff where they can hang out with their friends. So they don't necessarily drive all over the place like what we did. So this continual cycle where the car spent most of its life doing cold start, driving a short distance to where it never fully warmed up, being shut off, sitting all day, and then another cold start, and then driving a short distance and being shut off again, combined with some of the characteristics of E85, really destroyed her motor. Now sometimes I get in a situation where I think I know everything, but obviously I don't because of this. So knowing all about E85, we took all the normal precautions. We ran a synthetic top oil additive to prevent corrosion and things like that on the cylinder walls and parts of the engine, and to keep the top end lubricated. We ran a good quality synthetic oil, and knowing that we were doing a lot of short hop driving, we changed it at what we thought was an adequate amount about every 2,000 miles. But boy, were we wrong. And even myself, I think I know a little bit about engines. I learned a bunch of stuff about this engine. Now you've probably seen in our videos before how someone's ruined their engine running gasoline by starting it up, moving it around the shop every day, but then only letting it run for a minute or so at a time and totally destroying their engine after a year or so. Well, I never thought that if an engine ran about 5 minutes at a time that could happen. And on gasoline, it's probably not the greatest for it. It could mess things up and lead to a lot faster wear. But E85 with the short, always in cold start mode driving conditions will totally get destroyed. And so before you flame me, pay a lot of attention. The exception to this is short hop driving, never fully warming up, and just about that only. So if you run the E85 in your car, you probably notice how it makes a lot more condensation coming out of the exhaust in gasoline. And if you run on the track, you probably notice your catch cans fill up with water. Now that's because E85 makes a lot more water than gasoline. This water, some of it goes out the breather, but if you're always running in cold start mode, the engine's running a richer AFR. It's creating more water, more moisture, and nothing gets hot enough to boil it out of the oil. So, I thought I was slick and changing the oil really frequently, so that wasn't going to happen to me. But check out what happened. The whole sump filled up with this nasty tar-like sludge. I've never seen this on an engine that the oil was changed so frequently, but I want to swipe my finger in here and, look at this. That's nasty like tar. This was all in the sump. Obviously not good for your engine. We're really lucky not to spin bearings and not to have this crap migrate and go into some of the oil passages, but nothing good can come of that. And this is with very frequent oil change intervals. While we're talking about sludge, take a look at the oil pump. Now, all the places where the oil flow is kind of slow was also filled with the sludge. We're super lucky that none of the sludge really migrated to where it could really do some damage and completely block an oil passage. The variable cam timing system and the passages in the cylinder head were fine. We didn't destroy a cam, or we didn't destroy any of the variable cam timing stuff, but we're really lucky that that didn't happen. When you look at the block, you can see the sludge buildup in here. Normally when you run synthetic oil and change it frequently, when you open up the motor, everything looks brand new. But there was a bunch of sludge, and that's from all that ethanol condensation mixing with the oil and creating this horrible sludge situation. Surprisingly, when you look at the main bearings, they all look all right. Like the bearings are okay, they're not pitted. You can even see some of the zinc flash is still on them. So the bearings are fine, and I had a really hard time believing that when you see all this goop. Usually everything's pretty destroyed in that case, but the bearings were okay. I would say we got lucky that none of the passages got blocked and the oil pump didn't send a big glop of gunk someplace. When you look at the crank, you could see that the crank actually got rusty from all the condensation that was in the bottom end. The journals are mostly clear, but when you see where the groove is for the oil feed, there's a strip of corrosion going down all the parts of the journals. Now it's really light, it doesn't catch a fingernail or anything, and it'll probably polish right out, but you know, good thing this thing stopped running, or else the crank would be ruined. This crank can be saved, it's perfectly fine, but it's a step away from not doing too well. Now when you look at the rod bearings are still all in pretty great shape, even with all that gunk. There's no pitting, no grooving, no evidence that anything was about to spin. But you do see kind of a lighter mark where maybe some sludge was going through the oil feed holes and causing a slightly different wear pattern on the bearings. So nothing bad at the moment, but it could have gotten bad with a little bit more miles. Where it's really bad is on the piston and the rings. Now, you know, everybody says ethanol burns super clean, you're full of crap, but ethanol does burn cleaner than gasoline, but it's not like it leaves no residue, and it's not like it scrubs carbon off of your pistons like what a lot of people insist is true. Now, here's the amount of carbon that we have in this condition. Here's a piston from a race motor we did that was running pure race gas into racing conditions where carbon normally doesn't form up. Notice the dome is relatively clean. You can still kind of see the aluminum underneath the deposits. This E85 street engine's a lot worse. And here's a race engine that's run E98 its whole life. So this is almost running on pure ethanol. That would leave almost no combustion residue at all. But you actually see this race motor that ran on E98 has more deposits on it than this one that ran on race gas. Now the deposits that you see here are not necessarily coming from the ethanol. The ethanol like scrubs the cylinder walls and scrubs the combustion chamber and the oil on the valve stems a lot more than regular gasoline, for instance. So it's not so much the deposits from the ethanol, but it's the deposits of the from the gas that scrubbed off the surfaces there. So ethanol leaves deposits, believe it or not, and it's against what a lot of you guys think and insist on, but I'm not full of crap. Here it is right in front of you. Ethanol race engine, race gas engine. The reason I feel this comes from the oil being scrubbed off other surfaces and burned is when you feel like ethanol deposits or deposits on an ethanol run engine, they're kind of like slightly sticky, kind of like what you find in a two-stroke dirt bike that has oil mixed in the gas. Like a gasoline race motor, the deposits are kind of more hard and more carbon-like and kind of dry feeling, but ethanol engine, it's kind of softer and stickier, just like a two-stroke dirt bike. When you look what happened, The rings are completely stuck with this sticky, gooey residue. Now, they're not, the compression rings aren't stuck on all the pistons, but on some of them. But what's really the tickler is the oil rings are completely stuck. Like you can't even move them. You'd have to use a punch and a chisel to get them out. And you look at the separator groove is completely full of carbon and jammed up solid. So what was happening is the oil residue was getting scraped off the cylinder walls and just not getting hard enough to burn off, and ended up just turning into a hardened resin, sticking the rings. This is what caused the engine to lose compression and not run anymore. In fact, the oil rings were so stuck on this engine that on a couple cylinders, the stuck oil rings actually caused the ring land between the oil ring and the number 2 compression ring to break. Now, a lot of you guys will say, oh, it's detonation, but damage to the ring lands from detonation usually happen between the dome and the number 1 ring, and sometimes you see it between the number 1 and number 2 ring. This is if the detonation's super bad and your first ring land gets all busted up. But this is actually down at the bottom of the piston that hardly sees any of that detonation pressure. So yeah, it's pretty shocking. I've never seen rings stuck so thoroughly. It's almost like they were super glued in place. So even with all this gumminess going on and all the things that happened, the cylinder walls on this block are still really cherry. You can still see the honing marks, no grooving or scoring or anything. This is a fine block to go and rebuild and build something fast out of. So what are your lessons from this? If you do a lot of short hop around town driving with your E85 equipped car, I probably wouldn't do that. Like most of you that are running E85 are on flex fuel. If you're doing a lot of short hop driving, run gasoline, and then when you go to the track or when you need all the power, then you switch to E85. The other thing is, if you do short hop driving, man, change your oil frequently, maybe every 1,000 miles or something. Get that stuff out of your engine, don't let it form. The other thing I'd probably do is do a lot of short hop driving. I'd run like a tank of gasoline through everything every once in a while, probably maybe every 3rd tank or something, to get a lot of these ethanol type deposits out of the engine. Gasoline cuts that pretty good. That's probably not only better for your engine, but for your injectors and everything else. So I guess the rules to follow is, number 1, if you're doing really a bunch of short hop driving and not letting your engine warm up, don't run E85. It's not too good to run your engine like that even with gasoline, but E85 will thrash it a lot quicker. Number 2, drive for longer distances. If you have to do a bunch of short hop driving, drive a lot further, maybe a few times a week to do that. Number 3, change your oil a lot more frequently than every 2,000 miles, and use really good quality oil. The next thing, run a tank of gas through your system maybe every 3rd tank. Even if you don't do short hop driving, it's probably good to every once in a while run a tank of regular gas through your system. So this isn't meant to scare you off ethanol, but just be aware of what could happen and how to prevent it. If you like this content, be sure and subscribe. It helps us a lot. Be sure and comment. Watch this whole video and don't make stupid comments about this video especially. It's super annoying, but I'll make a stupid comment right back at you. Subscribe, enjoy this stuff, and I'll talk to you later.